All right, Herc, thank you so much again for joining me here on One Soccer. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How you doing?
Not too bad. I appreciate you coming on. And I want to start off with a question that I've been meaning to ask you for a very long time. And I don't know if I'm even close on it, but when you played back for the Colorado Rapids, did you ever have bleach blonde hair?
In Colorado, I don't think so. The
You don't think so?
Galaxy, no, I don't believe so. I know I did it with the Galaxy once. And I'm sure every kid who's played soccer in the States, or probably North America for that matter, at some point in their life has done it. I'm trying to think. It was the Romanian team that did it. I forget what World Cup, if it was 94 or 98. But after that, it was like a fad,
It
and
was a
everybody would do it. Yeah.
because I have a memory of my very first MLS game I ever watched, and I swear it was the Colorado Rapids, and I know you scored because I remember seeing your name, HERCULEZ GOMEZ. So I was like, okay, but I thought you had bleach blonde hair, but it could have been the snow, I guess. I mean, you were in Colorado, so maybe I'm wrong. So I just thought I was always meaning to ask you that.
Yeah, there was a bunch of guys on the Colorado team that had like frosted tips, like Mike Pecky and a
Uh,
few other guys had frosted tips, but I was all
not you.
natural, baby, all natural.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. That was always bugging me, but let's shift gears a little bit, Herc. So I wanted to ask you this for a while as well. What are your thoughts on John Herdman leaving Canada, and do you have anyone in mind that you like to see get the job?
Loaded question, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's complicated. Why do you leave Canada? It's one would think it's a very enticing job. I mean, you secured a World Cup berth. It's a World Cup at home in theory, right? The air quotes at home.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it goes to show you how dysfunctional Canadian soccer is, um, where somebody who was so successful with the men's program in the last cycle doesn't see it being a fruitful enough position where he's like, now I'm out. I don't even want to see what happens. I don't even want to try to be here. It's unfortunate. I thought he did a wonderful job with the program. um, sure made me a believer. If we're just talking about the World Cup cycle, the qualifying cycle, he was the best coach, hands down. He was better than Greg Berhalter. He was better than Tata Martino. Anybody else you could bring up, he was just better than him. Disappointing World Cup group, absolutely. But nobody's going to convince me that wasn't the hardest group in the World Cup. I mean, you had two semifinalists in that group, the golden generation of Belgium, and one of those semifinalists was a World Cup runner-up in the last edition. So it is a very complicated group. But to kind of see the downward spiral that it's been going since the World Cup, that kind of shows you or tells you everything you need to know about John Herdman and why he chose to leave. And listen, TFC, I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense in the way that TFC had kind of lost good faith with the people, in Toronto. Um, it's one thing to splash money around, but you got to do something with that money. Toronto, they've splashed money around before and they've been unsuccessful before. Before the Greg Vannies, before the Tim Beskochenkos, before they were successful, they were splashing money around. Aaron Vinter, I remember playing against those Toronto teams, in the Concacaf Champions League. They had money to spend. It's what you do with that money, and they had lost a lot of goodwill with Canadians in general in Toronto. So bringing somebody who's a national hero, so to speak, like John Herdman, it's a smart move by Bill Manning. I'll put it that way. It takes a lot of the shift or a lot of the attention off of him, who should completely be under the microscope.
Yeah, it was incredible just from the Canadian perspective to watch what happened over the past 2 or so years and this incredible journey to the 2022 World Cup and to see basically what's happened with the national team after because poor results haven't been there and then the friendlies issue and everything going on with the federation is frustrating because it seemed like for so long that the Canadian program just wasn't ever going to be able to hit those heights. And then we saw the progression and we're like, okay, we're kind of making it. This is what the good times feel like. And as soon as we almost, get back to a World Cup, kind of seems like we're going back down. But we're going to circle back to TFC because Michael Bradley, Herc, recently hung up his boots. I know you spoke about him a couple times before recently, but I want to know what he meant to U.S. soccer and how will the U.S. soccer fans remember him? Because I know I've heard you talk about before that he's directly tied to the failure of them qualifying for the 2018 World Cup.
Right. My comments were how unfair that is, right? That he's being used as a scapegoat for that failed World Cup campaign. Listen, Michael Bradley, is a hot rod amongst U.S. soccer circles. People ignore the fact that in his prime, he was one of the absolute best central midfielders in U.S. men's national team history. I don't care who you think in his current generation can come close to it. They don't. He would walk into this current generation in that midfield and he would start. He was that good of a player. People forget. I know there are fans who are very young, and then I hate being the old guy in the room because I'm definitely not. I have these conversations in my own circle, my own job, where I go on to shows, debate shows with, middle-aged men, 60, some guys who are 70 plus years old, and they'll bring back the past. And I'm like, you're just an old head talking. You can't compare. But we quickly forget how good of a player he was, how much he meant to the program, how many coaches, different coaches valued him, where he went, the leagues he played in, from the Eredivisie, in the Netherlands to the Bundesliga, to the Premier League, to Italian football. How many people around the world, like competitors around the world, knew Michael Bradley, would say Bradley in the midfield. Yes. How good that generation of players was. And he was one of those standouts, like people forget these things. People maybe don't even know these things, but the man was an absolute baller, tremendous player. And a guy that I have no doubt in my mind is going to continue to be involved in the sport. Certainly not as a pundit, probably. He's going to be like his dad as a coach, but that's where he's going to be. And people associate him with a game they lost in Trinidad because Bruce Arena wanted to trot out the same lineup, an aging lineup, in a game where all they needed was a tie, where they had a 3% chance of not qualifying for the World Cup, where they lose 2-1, and then you still have multiple outs. You have Mexico that just does not need to lose so they can tie or win against Honduras. They lose. You have Panama who needs to not beat Costa Rica. So even if they get a tie, they're out, they win. And by the way, how do they win? A phantom goal, a goal that never went in. If there's VAR, that doesn't happen. We're not even talking about this. In a campaign where they fired Jurgen Klinsmann after the first 2 games, after giving him an extension for getting out of the group of death in 2014, like a lot of different things were handled the wrong way. And Michael Bradley is one of 2 players, the other being Josie Altidore, who I completely feel have been used as scapegoats for the federation's problems, for what they didn't do right. Sure, Michael made his own mistakes, and so did Josie. That's the career of a footballer. But they are absolutely being used as scapegoats for not qualifying to that World Cup. And it's sad because there were other players on that team too who don't even come close to the scrutiny. Tim Howard, who's an absolute GOAT when it comes to U.S. men's national team. For some reason, he's excused from this scrutiny from players, and they'll sit there and they'll say, well, look how these players didn't try, in this game. Listen, man, if you're defined by one game that you have in your career, we're all in trouble because everybody's had a game where they're just not good. So it's sad. But I've got no doubt in my mind who Michael Bradley is in the spectrum of U.S. soccer.
And I agree with everything you're saying. And I know that TFC fans at least will remember him very differently because this happened in my backyard. I remember when that trio of DPs came, Altidore, Bradley, Javinko, and they were just unbelievable to watch. I'm sure TFC fans will look back. It's a shame that Bradley had to go out holding the wooden spoon, but it was still an incredible journey. And I think TFC fans will definitely respect everything he did for the club.
He's as advertised for TFC. Listen, you play long enough, fans are going to see your bad moments. It comes with age. Like nobody leaves the game victorious. Nobody leaves the game, unbeaten. Father Time beats us all at some point. How long you stay, how much you love the game, maybe we're all prisoners to that feeling, right? But Michael Bradley, without a doubt, will go down as one of the most important players in Toronto's history.
Now, Herc, you played with Bradley actually at TFC, and I have a curious question for you. So you played obviously in Major League Soccer. You played down in Mexico as well. What do you think the biggest difference between those 2 leagues were during your playing career? And do you still think that's the biggest difference today?
Money. Absolutely.
Money.
Yeah, that's money.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Toronto tried bringing me down as a DP in 2012, and I was in Mexico. I was doing well. I'd already won a goal scoring title. I was fighting for league titles, championships, and I didn't even want to hear. I didn't even want to hear the offer. This was around the time before they started bringing the likes of Josie Altidore. You know, it was like when it became a fad to bring American players back. You know, they reached out, and I was one of the American players they wanted to bring back, and I didn't even want to listen to it. I was making good money in Mexico, and already what would be considered DP money. I was in a system that I liked, in a country that was football mad. It wasn't in my perspective. You know, I knew the type of finances that Major League Soccer had in that time, because I can go up and Google them. I can see who's making what, and I knew that playing in these tournaments, these Concacaf, tournaments, I'd be on the side with more money. We'd have more DP players, if that's the language we want to use here. And it's that gap has slowly but surely been closing. And that's why that's one of the factors of why you've seen these results in Leagues Cup. But when you talk about the upper echelon of Mexican football, there's still quite a ways to go to reach that money. I mean, Tigres and Rayados and Club America, they've got some deep pockets. And you can see it in their play. You can see it in the type of players they bring in, where these players are in their career, how deep these rosters are, the ability to keep players. I had in my podcast, Vamos, on the Men in Blazers Network, I had Walker Zimmerman on. And Walker used to play for LAFC. And, LAFC bottled it twice this year against Leon in the Concacaf Champions League. When I had them favored, they choked. Home and away, they choked. And then they're up 2-0 in LA. I know it wasn't at home, but it's still in LA. You're home. It's at the Rose Bowl. And you're up 2-0 against Monterrey, Rayados de Monterrey, another choke job. And I asked him, like, you've been in that club. Why can't they overcome these big moments? He reminded me about Philly, in the final, and I would say, well, they almost bottled that too. It took penalty kicks and a Gareth Bell, miracle goal to kind of get you there. But he said, I was like, why is it? Let me rephrase that. I'll give you my perspective. I feel not enough of those players in LAFC have been there, have done that in those pressure moments, because there's so much player turnover. Whereas if you look at Tigres, for better part of a decade, you've got a spine of players who have played countless finals, domestic finals, international finals, cups, knockout games. They've lost them, they won them, but they've been in those moments so they can fall back on those moments when times are hard and know it's going to be okay. We can still do this. And they pull out wins. Like, they've just got more of those battle-proven players. And then Walker said something that I thought just was very intelligent. And I was like, he's absolutely right. He goes, well, they don't have a tough time keeping those players because of mechanisms in their league. And he's right. When you have players who win championships, goal scoring titles, best 11s, all-stars, et cetera, some of these players have performance escalators, or just some of these players think they deserve more, and they do deserve more. And the inability to keep these players in Major League Soccer because of the mechanisms, because of the salary cap, because of whatever stupid rule they have that limits their wallets or how they can spend said money, goofy money like TAM or GAM or whatever they want to make up, that limits you keeping this team together. A championship team, a dynasty, it limits what you can do. So I thought it was one of the smartest answers that I'd heard in a long time to the difference in Major League Soccer and Liga MX, but he was absolutely right.
So quickly here, do you think, or do you hope that the salary cap disappears one day?
No, I don't hope it disappears. No, I hope they're smarter about it. Listen, I'm not saying world football is in a tough spot right now. Not everybody's the Premier League. Not everybody's the Premier League. The Premier League is its own animal, its own beast. It's very different to the rest of the teams in the world, the rest of the leagues in the world. A lot of teams are bleeding. I read an article and you got to excuse me because I don't remember where it was, but it was about how for the first time in 17 years, AC Milan is profitable. A club like AC Milan, a brand like AC Milan is finally profitable after 17 years, and how its counterparts, Inter and Juve, are not. That's a big brand. Those are big brands. I mean, you look at the top teams in the top 5 leagues in the world, and maybe some of those are financially solvent. The rest of the league, they're hurting. They need it. You know, that goes for Liga MX as well. Liga MX, like those teams I mentioned, there's an upper echelon of maybe like 5 or 6 teams that financially do very well. But the rest of the teams, they need Leagues Cup very badly. That's why the league wants to do this. You know, so I don't hope the salary cap goes away. I do hope they're smarter about opening up the purse strings, because more money, more talent obviously wins games. Winning games, being entertaining, brings in people, and that can only be a good thing.
I definitely agree, and I'm glad you brought up AC Milan, because the perfect transition to the next question I wanted to go to, and that's with Jonathan David, because, I mean, you knew I was going to bring him up. I know you love Jonathan David as well. He's been recently linked with a move to AC Milan, and after seeing Des, Musa, and Christian Pulisic, obviously there, seeing their experiences, good and bad, I guess, with Des, what's your, I guess, thought on maybe Jonathan David going to AC Milan? Do you think it could be a good landing spot for him?
I don't know about AC Milan. Now, I will tell you why I don't know about AC Milan. The next move is always interesting. It has to be the move when you go, because when you talk about Jonathan David, you're talking about teams like Milan, Spurs. You're talking about some Atletico. He's been linked to Arsenal in the past. You're talking about some big teams, and we're having this conversation right now with Santiago Jimenez, right? So Santiago Jimenez is lighting up the Eredivisie, and in Netherlands is clearly not at the rate of a La Liga, of an Italian football, of a Premier League. And some would argue that France maybe is not either, right? If you take out the PSGs of the world. I was doing some homework on players that have made the jump to those big teams, right? Let's just use Real Madrid as an example. Luka Jovic, Serbian player who scored a bunch of goals at Frankfurt from the age of 18 to 21. He scored like 35 goals in those 3 years in Bundesliga. And at 21, $60-something million, transfer to Real Madrid. Ends up scoring 2 goals for Real Madrid, a team that's going to give you countless opportunities in front of goal if you play as a 9. Scored 2 goals for him. In the 4 years since, he scored 13 league goals. He's at AC Milan right now. He's the backup to Oliver Giroud at AC Milan. He currently doesn't have a goal in the season. You've got to be very careful on the next move. You've got to make sure it's a correct move. I believe in Jonathan David and his talent. Jonathan Davis, for my money, is still the best 9 in this region in Concacaf. I mean, he's got a certain pedigree to his game that other 9s don't. I don't care what 9 you put in front of me in this region. They don't have his pedigree. The guy goes to Genk and at 18 scores a ton of goals, a ton of assists in a feeder team like Genk that supplies players to some of the best teams, some of the best leagues in the world. Goes to Lille and becomes our all-time leading goal scorer. I mean, how old is he right now? 24? 23? You know? All-time leading goal scorer at Lille, being linked to some of the biggest teams in the world. I like the pedigree. I like the progression, but it's got to be a place where he can shine. I truly believe in his talent, his playmaking ability as a 9. When given the opportunity as a 9, how he shines. It's just about making the next move the right move. I don't know if Milan is the right move. Like, Milan's got their own problems right now. Milan's not scored a goal in the last 5 Champions League matches. You know, the home and away series versus Inter in the semifinals of last year's Champions League, and 3 group play games this year versus Newcastle, which I don't know how they didn't win like 4 or 5-0. They just could not put the ball in the back of the net. Dortmund and we just saw PSG in that thumping they gave them. They couldn't score a single goal in the last 5 Champions League games. So it's got to be a situation where he's going to get looks. He's going to get chances where he's going to be an important player. I don't know if Milan right now is a team for him.
So for me, for Jonathan David, I tried to follow his story and rumors all as much as I possibly could. And there was a lot of different ones. And it's difficult because I love Jonathan David's game. And I feel like after being at Lille probably a couple seasons longer than he wanted to be, he really had a good campaign having 24 goals. And I don't care what they say about Liga, 24 goals in a top 5 league is incredible. And I know that the price tag was high and there's a lot of different links, but the ones that I always liked the most was Tottenham. I liked it because I liked what Ange was going to, what I thought he was going to do with the team. And I've said this on plenty of different platforms. I thought that he should have been their signing. They went and signed Johnson instead. He hasn't done too much, but after seeing the way that Tottenham is performing right now, and if Jonathan David was in that team, it makes me excited. But instead, he's kind of struggling so far at Lille right now. Like I doubt at this pace he's going to even come close to the 24 goals he put up unless he really, really gets hot. And the biggest issue with Jonathan David in the past is that he was looked at as a bit of a streaky striker. He would score in bunches and then he'd go 6-7 games. So to see him now all of a sudden get in this slump, it makes me a little bit nervous about, and that's why these like AC Milan rumors are coming up, is that now that 60 million euro price tag has dropped to 40. So I don't really know exactly where I'd want to see him go. I mean, I guess AC Milan can't score goals. Is that a good or bad thing? I don't know. Sink or swim for David. But if you had to pick one, Herc, you heard my club, it's Tottenham that I'd like to see him go. I don't even know now. But if it's up to you, where would you hope he would maybe get a look?
Spurs is awesome. I mean,
Spurs
they're top
is
of the league right now in the Premier League. Yeah. Postecoglou, like Ange is a great coach for a player like Jonathan David, because there are coaches out there, there are teams out there, there are just boards, sporting directors who look at the passport and it matters to them. Well, we're not sure. Let's go tried and proven. Brazilian, Argentinian, et cetera, right? Ange Postecoglou is an interesting coach because if you follow his story, like Australian guy who coached in Australia, who coached the national team, goes and coaches in like the 3rd Greek division, Japan, Scotland, and everywhere he's used different types of players. And as long as they fit the system, he entrusts those players and gives them confidence to play a style that I think Jonathan David would be very, very good at. If you're playing that system, you've got to be constantly moving. You have to have a work rate. You have to have speed. You've got to be a pressing forward. You have to be able to run in behind. You have to be a player that scraps battles and doesn't mind rolling up your sleeves. And it's 1,000 miles per hour. I think Jonathan David could be very good forward for Spurs. But the price tag, there's a big price tag. There's an expectation. And the only players who don't go in slumps that I've seen are the Cristiano Ronaldos and the Leo Messis of the world. Erling Haaland went like on a 7-8 game, slump as well. Excuse me. So that doesn't worry me. Goal scorers are streaky and there's a reason for that. You put the ball in the back of the net, it gives you confidence. The next one goes in, and you feel like you just can't miss. I don't mind that one bit. But I do think the next move is the most important move. And, I use Santi Jimenez as an example because right now the whole of Mexico expects a Real Madrid type of move, expects the next Hugo Sanchez. And he may very well be there in terms of like Chicharito Hernandez to get into a big team and being an important piece for that team. How big of a piece? It remains to be seen, but a piece nonetheless. But those cases are so few and far between. Like there's always a stepping stone for these players. Like Hugo Sanchez went to Atletico before he went to Madrid. You know what I mean? Javier Hernandez was like the 6th forward in line and kind of worked his way, in Manchester United when not even the coach knew his name type of deal. And those are phenomenon. So, hopefully the next one is the right one for Jonathan David, and he can show us why he's the best 9 in this region.
I like that. And I agree. And I was trying to calm a lot of Canadians when he didn't get the move last year. I was like, you know what? This is fine. Fonseca's coming in, plays a beautiful brand of football. Let's see what he can do. It's just the fact that he did really take a big step into those 24 goals. You didn't see those slumps that I wanted to see him get that move. But
Fonseca was playing Timothy Way as a left back. So don't go touting this one too much.
Okay. All right. Not too much. Not too much. All right, Herc. So now we're going to go into a couple rapid fire questions, and I'm excited to put you on the spot. So let's see how you do. I'm just going to read you the question, and you're just going to, without thinking, just blurt it out. So we'll see if I can get you here. So, all right.
It's usually
you ready?
what I do.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. So Seattle Sounders or Tigres?
Ooh, Sounders. I was there longer. I was there
All
longer. Right. But let me just say, I know it's supposed to be fast, but Tigres by far is the one place where the players are idolizing. You can do no wrong no matter what.
All right, that's fair. LA or Vegas?
LA. That's where I'm at right now. So LA.
Beautiful. Scoring a goal or winning a match?
Winning a match.
Winning
Absolutely.
A match. All right.
I hate losing.
Best striker in Concacaf: David, Jimenez, Balogun.
I'll still go with Jonathan David. Yeah, there's pedigree there. I think there's history. There's no recency bias, but Santi Jimenez, like, let me just say, I love everything I see from this kid. Everything. Attitude, work rate, the ability to show speed, running behind, but also showing strength, maturity, keep scoring goals. Like, I love everything I'm seeing from him.
Assuming that Canada, USA, and Mexico all qualify for the 2024 Copa America, what would a successful tournament look like for each of them, starting with Mexico?
Quarterfinals for Mexico.
USA?
Semifinal.
And Canada?
At this rate, getting out of the group.
Getting out of the group?
Without even seeing the groups.
One word to describe what it's like playing in CONCACAF.
Difficult. It's and I'll change it to unique, because it's so big. You can go from tropical weather to snowy climates to dry to, like artificial turf to monsoon-like weather. It's just so difficult, and the styles are difficult too. And the way that they are reffed is even more difficult, because there's not like in Europe, I feel like there's one way to referee. In CONCACAF, there are like 5 different ways to referee, so it's incredibly difficult to adapt to.
We were so close to keeping it just to quick rapid pace. I like that, but this is the last rapid fire one. It's my favorite one. One word to describe your Football America's co-host, Sebi.
Passionate.
I thought you were going to say small. I thought
passionately small.
Passionately small. That's fair. All right, Herc. I do have actually one final question for you. So I'm assuming you know this, but I see you going on interviews all the time with all types of content creators. It doesn't matter how big or small their following is. You're always willing to put your face out there and give your opinion. And I think it's awesome. So for all those creators out there and others who are looking to break into this industry, what would your biggest piece of advice be for them?
Repetition. Just like anything in life, you want to master it, you got to do it over and over and over again, even if it's not good. That's the only way to get good.
It's great advice. Great way to leave off the episode, Herc. I really appreciate the time, my man. Keep killing it.
I appreciate it, Josh.